biology first. I know, it's better at the beginning
All right.
The math are easy, the numbers are last.
All right, everyone. Let's quiet down now. Let's quiet down. Let's get started. So today, I have a topic that is near and dear to my heart. How to talk about movies. Yeah. So, the basic question you have to ask yourself is when you enter into discussion with someone about a movie, what is your objective? Is your objective to win? Is your objective to look the other person in the eye and say, you're wrong and I'm going to prove you wrong? Is your objective to look at them and browbeat them until they agree with you? Well, if that's your objective, you sound like an awful person. That's no fun to talk to. I don't think that is the objective of film criticism in general, and just having discussions about movies. And you know what? I feel like the point of film criticism and talking about movies is just to talk about them. We don't live in a world where, everyone agrees on everything, and, we can choose to treat that situation with a certain amount of grace and understanding, or we can choose to act like the other person is a moral failure of a human being because they don't like your favorite movie the same way, the same amount as you do. So, really, this entire talk came to mind because I've had interactions with people where, they'll mention a movie that they like, and it'll be like, I like this movie. And then I respond with something like, well, I don't like this movie for this reason, and this reason. And the only reason they can come up with to counter is, well, I like that movie. And that kind of ends the discussion because they can't go any further. Because, they know their opinion, but they have no way of expressing it. It just amounts to, I like that movie, and there's no more than that. Well, if you actually want to bring up a movie and your opinion about the movie in a discussion, I kind of expect you to be able to talk about it a little bit, to be able to talk about your opinion a little bit. And, if the point was just to hear someone else come along and say, oh, I like it too, even then it's like, what's the extent of that conversation? It's not very interesting. So let me give you a couple of examples from my life. So the first is I wrote something about a filmmaker recently, and someone came at me very hard because while the piece was about the filmmaker in general, I didn't talk about one of his movies all that much, while implying that the filmmaker himself was generally not very good. And this person came at me very hard because I didn't love this one specific movie enough. He directly insulted me. It was weird. And I didn't want to engage with this person. We could have talked about this movie. We could have talked about how, it's like, what he prioritized in the film was just simply not what I prioritized in the film, and we could have actually had a discussion about it. No one's minds would have been changed, but you know what? We would have had a discussion, and it might have been nice. But he just decided to insult me, and I didn't want to engage with him anymore. So that was kind of the end of that. The other example is a very contrasting example. So one of my best friends on the internet is a guy named Mark. He comments frequently, and we've been talking about movies for years, for like 6 or 7 years. We've been talking about movies. And I think the one moment in time when our relationship became an actual friendship was over a disagreement about a movie. That movie in particular is Prometheus. I love Prometheus. I think Prometheus is great. I think it's wonderfully entertaining. I love it. He hates Prometheus. He thinks it's awful. He hates everything about it. And we ended up exchanging several very long emails back to each other where we just explained our opinion. Each email was like 1,000 words long. It was very long, detailed explanations about why we liked things and didn't like things. And that approach to something where we had very, very different opinions about a particular movie, but we were able to approach the conversation in a certain dispirited, respectful fashion, actually created what I think is the start of a friendship. We're definitely friends, but it's like, I think that's where it really started as a friendship, was that interaction where we were able to respectfully look at each other online and say, you have a different opinion and I'm going to present my opinion. We're going to challenge each other's opinions, but ultimately, we're fine with exchanging just opinions, and it's fine, even though we massively disagree about this one particular movie. And we've all had that interaction with someone where, oh, you don't like this movie, oh, you do like this movie, and now I don't have to listen to you about anything. It's like, all right, it's like that one movie is particularly important to you, and, not agreeing on that one movie is like super important, and there's no reason to listen to this person ever again. Okay. That's fun. That's fun. But it's like, Mark hates Prometheus with a passion. I love Prometheus with a passion, and we just keep talking about movies. It's like, it's essentially a joke between us at this point, but it's just, we just keep talking about it. And he recently went through Otto Preminger with me. He went in expecting great things. We were both kind of disappointed, and we just, were talking about it as we went through it. And it was just this very healthy discussion between us about what we saw as merits and demerits within Otto Preminger's filmography. And, it's because we, trusted each other and were willing to say things to each other. So that was a very healthy conversation. And that's what I see film criticism as in general. It's not just, putting your opinion out there. It's an exchange of ideas. And so if you've had trouble with this in the past, if you've had trouble understanding how to just express yourself, well, I hope to give you some pointers. So the first thing to understand is that the discussion itself should be relatively dispassionate. You should have passion about the movies you love. You should have passion about the movies you hate. But ultimately, the passion should be for the movies themselves. It should not be for the discussion. It's like you want to bring your passion to the discussion, but the discussion itself with another person who may or may not agree with you should be relatively, it's like you should be able to divorce yourself from it a little bit. You should be able to step back from it, saying, I'm just talking about a movie I like. You're just talking about a movie you don't like. And you not liking a movie that I like is not a personal attack on me. Me liking a movie that you don't like is not a personal attack on you. It's just a difference of opinion, and we're just going to discuss it. So that is the first thing. Go into these discussions with a certain level of dispassion. It's like, I can't believe you don't love this movie. Okay. It's like, if that's the end of your effort to understand is just being flabbergasted at someone having a difference of opinion of you, then, well, I guess that's the end of the discussion, and that's kind of the end of the interesting parts of sharing your love of movies with people. So the next thing to really understand is that we're talking about film criticism. We're talking about something that is inherently subjective. Now, I'm going to hear from people, it's like, no, there is objectivity in this. There is absolute objectivity. They're going to point to certain things. And I'm just going to be like, no. Objectivity is something you can measure, okay? It's a repeatable measurement that you can do. So like a ruler, I'm going to take a yardstick and I'm going to measure this wall, and I'm going to discover it's 25 feet long, whatever it is. And I can repeat that over and over again. I can use agreed upon measurements, different yardsticks, and just I can just come to the same measurement over and over again. It is observable, it is repeatable, it is measurable, it is objective. I once had an interaction with a guy who decided that he was going to prove that there was objectivity in film criticism. He was going to prove it. And he was just deeply frustrated that no one had come up with a system yet. And so he decided to come up with a system. And that system was he was going to take 8 different elements that go into a story, that go into a movie, and he was going to assign numbers to each of them. So cinematography, acting, directing, writing. There were 8 of them. I don't remember all 8. That's not something that I've lingered on over the years. And so he would assign those numbers to all 8, and then he would average them, and then he would get a score. So, this is an 8, this is a 3, this is a 7, blah, blah, blah. And then, we have the end result of a 6.73, and that is the objective score of that movie. And it fell apart the second I asked him, okay, so you say that cinematography is an 8, but what if I say it's a 9? How do you measure that? How do you measure the quality of cinematography? Where's the cinematograph, whatever it would be, that measures the quality of an image? I can find measuring devices to determine the amount of light and the amount of color, but can I determine the quality of the image? Or is that itself subjective? It's like, this image is great. Well, why? Well, because it has this composition. Well, I don't like that composition. Oh no, where are we? So the most famous example of this sort of framework for interpreting, drama is probably going to be Aristotle's Poetics. Aristotle, the ancient Greek thinker who decided that he was going to write a treatise about how to actually perform drama in the Greek theater. And it is largely centered around the idea of the 3 unities: unity of time, unity of place, and unity of action. So this is one of the oldest models of drama. And what if you don't follow it? What if you don't follow the unity of time? What if you take 36 hours to tell a story instead of 24? What if you don't follow the unity of place? What if, you have things happen across multiple locations? What if you don't follow the unity of action? What if you have, multiple points within a single work? Well, you failed Aristotle's Poetics. Does that mean you're bad? If you take 36 hours to tell a story, are you telling a bad story? Well, Aristotle's Poetics were largely, were entirely built for the Greek drama space, where people all dressed the same and differentiated themselves with masks. And so the unity of time and the unity of place made a lot of sense, because plays usually lasted about an hour, and it's just, you kind of simplify the action so that it's easily understandable to audiences. And so I don't find the unity of time and the unity of place to be particularly useful in applying to modern movie making. I do find the unity of action to be extremely useful, though, because I find it to be very beneficial. I think that all story should have a central point. And, am I rejecting everything if it doesn't follow it automatically because I'm an unthinking machine that says this is my criteria? It's like, I love movies that don't have much of a central point. It happens, but it's a useful framework. And so that takes me to my next big point. This is not a negative. It's actually a positive. It's telling you to do something. Find a framework. Find a model on which to build your criticism of storytelling. So, let's say, for example, that, let's take me for an example real quick. A few years ago, I was thinking about narrative a lot, and I decided that I came up with a model of how storytelling works. And that model was 4 basic elements built on top of structure. So, essentially 5 things, but one of them just kind of undergirds everything. And the 4 things on top were, in alphabetical order, character, plot, style, and theme. All stories have them in different amounts. So, if we were to apply this model, let's apply it to 2 very different filmmakers in general. On the one hand, we have Michael Bay. On the other hand, we have Terrence Malick. So applying my model, You know, I just think of the George Box phrase, all models are wrong, some models are useful. And, you know, so applying this, what I think to be a useful model, to Michael Bay and Terrence Malick, Michael Bay prioritizes style, plot over almost anything else. Character is relatively prominent. You know, I don't think his movies are devoid of character. And theme tends to be very, very low on his, you know, priority scale. On the other hand, Terrence Malick, style and theme and character are very, very important, but plot is very unimportant. His movies usually don't have that much of a plot. And so just applying this model framework to the two, you can see how this might be useful in figuring out why you like certain things and not other things. You know, the model is very generalized, you know, so, you know, they're both highly stylized, but highly stylized in very different ways. So again, it's of limited use, but it's helped building the framework in my mind. How do I talk about these different filmmakers who do very different things? And what I kind of figured out while I was thinking through this and applying it to different movies is that, you know, most people seem to really prioritize plot. They love plot. They love not knowing where the story is going, but they need the story to be clearly laid out at the same time. And so, you know, plot and story are not the same thing. You know, plot is an element of story, but, you know, if you can make that plot like all over the place, unpredictable, but at the same time moving towards a very specific location, you know, people are going to tend to eat it up. As opposed to something like Terrence Malick, where if you're just kind of twirling in sheer curtains, you know, for 2 hours, you know, looking for a thematic point through like poetic imagery, people tend to reject it. You know, they don't want to watch that. That's not what they're interested in. And does that make one right and one wrong? Does that make one good and one bad? And that's not the point. The point of the model isn't to determine whether a movie is good or bad. It's to help derive a framework for your own thinking. So, you know, my framework was just something that I came up with. You know, Aristotle's Poetics is something else. Mike at Red Letter Media explained his own model a few years ago, which I found interesting. I don't entirely remember what it was, but it's like, you know, this sounds like an interesting, useful model. It's not mine, and I don't need to use it, but it's fine. You know, it's the lens through which he interprets movies and his own taste. And so if you can like use an existing framework, if you can come up with your own framework to help give you the vocabulary of what you like and give you a standing to understand why you like certain things and other people like other things, it's going to give you a rhetorical baseline for how to actually approach these conversations. So now, you know, I don't assiduously apply my model to every movie. It's like I'm not sitting there going, okay, so this movie is 70% plot, this movie is 20% character. I don't do crap like that. That's stupid. You know, that's reductivist and stupid, and you shouldn't do stuff like that. But it has allowed me a certain level of grammar in order to be able to explain why I like things and why I don't like things. So if I don't like characters, if I don't think the characters are interesting, I'm able to like dig into that and say, well, okay, so you like this movie, but I don't think the characters act believably. I don't find them interesting. I think they're thin, you know, these sort of things. But then someone can retort, well, I love the plot. You know, I love how the plot moves. And then I can retort, well, I don't believe the plot because I don't believe the characters. Are we wrong? Are they right? Am I wrong? Am I right? Are they wrong? I don't know. Again, there is no objectivity here. It's all interpretation. It's all personal taste. You know, so with that framework, you can hopefully find a way to explicate your own personal taste. And that is not objectivity. No, that is just a way for you to find the framework to actually explain yourself. And so, you know, coming back to this idea that there is no objectivity here, you know, people desperately want it. They want to be right. They want their opinion to be right. And they want to be able to point to, that is the best movie ever. That is the worst movie ever. And I have proven it scientifically. And so you end up replacing objectivity with taste and consensus. So we can't measure the quality of an image. We can measure elements within that image and say, and make a determination whether we think it's good or bad. But, that's not objective. And so what you end up having is your own taste. So your own taste is partially a learned behavior, kind of what you were brought up on, but ultimately there's no accounting for it, and there are a lot of personal elements that go into it. And you know what? Sometimes you just don't like The Godfather. Sometimes you just don't like The Lord of the Rings. Sometimes you just don't like The Shawshank Redemption. Sometimes you look at the top 50 on the IMDb's top 250, and you're like, I hate all of these movies. And what you're facing up against in that situation is consensus. So something like the IMDb's top 250 list, it doesn't measure movies, it measures opinions. And it creates a sense of consensus. So you look at the very top, you look at The Godfather, number 1, for as long as that thing has existed. Does that make it the best movie ever? Because 1 million people have rated it so highly. Is that what makes the best movie ever? 1 million people saying this is the best movie ever. Is that what it takes? Is that all it takes? It's like your own personal opinion doesn't matter. You can think it's good, but over long, you can think it's bad. This movie's boring. I don't get it. It's bad. I don't see what everyone else is seeing. Does that make your opinion wrong? What it makes is your opinion out of step with the consensus. And I often see people using consensus as a bludgeon. And it's wrong. So it's like, how could you think that this isn't one of the greatest movies ever? Look, everyone else thinks so. Well, it's like, I don't think The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is very good. I find it boring. I don't care that it's number 7 or 6 or whatever it is on the IMDb top 20. I don't care. I don't find it interesting. I find it boring. Does that make my opinion wrong? It makes my opinion out of step with a lot of people. Now, I have a lot of opinions that are just bog standard. Just like boringly bog standard. I think The Godfather is great. I think Casablanca is great. I love Wes Anderson movies. It's like I have a lot of these bog standard opinions that are just not, they don't break new ground. But sometimes we all have that weird opinion. I think Escape from LA is awesome. I think it's better than Escape from New York. Bong Joon-ho agrees with me, by the way.
사실 LA가 더 좋거든요.
So I was talking with a friend of mine who's another huge cinephile, and I was telling him that I actually like Escape from LA better than Escape New York, and he got furious over it. He was like, "How could you?"
So there's your argument by authority. And that gets to a certain point I have where we all end up falling into these rhetorical fallacies, these rhetorical traps, things like argument by authority. Well, the critics loved it, so therefore it's great. Or argument ad populum. Well, everyone else loves it, so therefore it's great. And they're fallacies for a reason. They don't actually persuade people. You're looking at someone in the eye, and you're saying your opinion is wrong because 1 million other people disagree with you. Is that persuasive? Is that telling them, oh, I need to rethink it? No, if you want to be persuasive, you have to understand your own opinion. You have to understand what goes into movie making. And a lot of the times, it doesn't work. You can know so much about movie making, you can know so much about your own taste, and you can spend thousands and thousands of words explaining why you like or hate a movie, and the other person is completely unpersuaded. It happened between me and my friend Mark on Prometheus. We spent thousands of words talking to each other, and we still have diametrically opposed opinions about the movie. Completely different opinions, and it's fine. I think the most success I've ever had in terms of arguing with someone about a movie it's not changing their opinion. It was getting them to watch it again. I never found out if this person ever actually watched it again, but I was talking to someone about Kingdom of Heaven, and they were using the point that Orlando Bloom doesn't feel like a standard hero. And I explained, from my point of view, that he's not supposed to be. He's supposed to be more like a Moses type figure who can't speak. He's the right figure at the right time that, being used as a tool by a higher power in order to advance, the higher power's interest. And it doesn't necessarily make him a popular speaker. And, just explaining it this way got him to say that he would revisit it. I don't know if he ever did. I imagine if he did revisit it, he had the same opinion as before, where he just found Orlando Bloom uncompelling. I doubt I actually changed his opinion, but it was that was the most I've ever gotten, I think. I've never convinced someone that a movie they hate is actually great. I've never convinced someone that a movie they love is actually terrible. I've never done that. I don't think that's possible. And if that's your objective, if your objective is just to browbeat someone into having the right opinion, no one's going to want to talk to you. You're just uninteresting. You're not someone interesting to speak with. But if you understand your own opinion, if you understand, a certain level of what goes into a movie, again, you don't need to become a cinematographer, and, win Oscars to be able to talk about whether you like or dislike images. And anyone who, tries to push you away because you don't like an image that they like, but they have, greater knowledge of what goes into an image or something, if that's the reason they're pushing you away, that person's an asshole, and they should not be spoken to. It's there's room for education, obviously. It's this image is actually really good because it follows the rule of threes, because the contrasting colors on this part of the image and that part is actually, quite aesthetically pleasing. But if someone doesn't find it aesthetically pleasing, what are you going to do? It's there's always room for education. And that's part of the big reason to actually talk to people. It's to figure out things, to have conversations with people, to understand different points of view. I know why people hate Prometheus better than almost anyone who actually hates Prometheus, because I have had it explained to me so many times, and I still love it. It doesn't matter. And so what I'm straining to get people to do here is to stand up and say, I like this movie, and I know why I like this movie, and I'm unafraid of explaining why I like this movie. And for another person to come along and say, I hate this movie, I know why I hate this movie, and I can explain why I hate this movie, let's talk about it. And I think that is the ultimate point of film criticism, of film fandom. It's not to follow a lead. It's not to just browbeat other people into your opinion. It's not to become lemmings for some other opinion. It's to form your own, understand it, and to be able to explain it. And to be able to actually have conversations with people about it. To be able to talk to people about how it's great that we have this disagreement. Let's talk about it. And those are the conversations I tend to run towards. It's oh man, I love this movie, but you hate it. Why do you hate it? I want to know. Tell me why. I'm interested. It's not because I'm looking for a rhetorical trap to get you. It's not because I'm looking for a way to change your mind. It's I know I'm not going to change your mind. I'm just interested. Why this movie that I find self-evidently great, that I just love, but you hate. I want to know. Tell me why. You're not going to change my mind, but I want to know. And that's what I think the point of just all of this is. It's not lecturing. Here I am lecturing, saying it's not the point. And just that's what I love. So yeah, disagree with me. Just don't be an asshole about it and know how to explain yourself. That's all. Because I want to know. I want to know why we disagree. That's what I find interesting. All right. So that's it. That's all we got time for. Your homework is watch The Furies. Your homework is watch The Furies by Anthony Mann. And yeah, just go do that. All right. Until next time.
Oh, this is the one you like. Yeah, it's a Genesis. Exodus. It sounds like the one you've been singing forever. We too weak. I'm right. Like, it was like, is there a song? I'm not connected to the Wi-Fi because it won't let you get on YouTube. But it ain't no signal inside. No, really.